Well, as the episode continues, we're talking with the Executive Director for the Tomah Historical Society, Jim Weinzattel. Jim, we're down here, Tomah Museum on Superior Avenue. In a little bit, we're going to do a little walkthrough. Give people an idea kind of what's down here if they've never been down here. But the key thing about the museum, Jim, is that people are constantly donating items for the museum. A perfect example is on our right here, or on my left, just recently donated by the Mokes, right?
That's right. Dave and Shelley Moak came by last week, and they had this shoe shine stand and stool that had been used by Bob Benjamin on Main Street here in Tomah for many years in the past. And it was built in 1906 in Chicago, and there is a picture of Bob Benjamin and the stand over at the historical history room over at Sparta, and we're in the process right now of getting a copy of that picture, and we'll put this display out. It's on loan until next year, 2017. So if you don't get down here this year, you'll have a chance to come down in 2017. It'll still be here.
Okay. And again, what year is this from, Jim?
1906.
Wow, a lot of history. Again, Dave and Shelley Moak, we want to thank them for loaning this to the museum at least through 2017, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, if we're going to go from the back of the museum out to the front, then Jim's just going to give us a little walkthrough. So that's the next thing you'll see as we're down here at the museum. All right, first of all, the address down here, Jim, is what?
1112 Superior Avenue.
Okay, for many years it was owned by Joyce and Frosty Maids, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Joyce Maids had a women's clothing store here called Joyce's Clothes Post.
Picture of Joyce right there, yeah.
And
over here.
Her and Frosty, 18 years ago, decided they would retire and donate the building to start a museum. And they asked the good people of Tomah to either donate or loan items to get a museum started here. And here we are 18 years later. They've both since passed, but they would be very proud of what they started here.
So Jim, as we're going to show in a moment, there's a lot of stuff in here. What percentage of the stuff in this store, in your museum right now, is probably donated? 50%? Is that or is that number too high?
It's probably about 95%.
Okay, so you rely on people. If people are looking in right now,
we would rather have them donate the items. There's a lot of problems with loans. If you loan something and it's indefinite loan and the person passes away, then we're faced with the responsibility of which relative we give it to, and we don't want to get in that position. So when we do take loans, we only take them for a specific period of time, and we're very limited to what we take.
So you'd rather not have loans then?
That's true.
Okay. Have you ever had to turn, maybe somebody's brought something down here, have you ever had to turn anybody away?
Oh, yes indeed. Bigger items especially. I've had things like plows and farm equipment and things like that. We just don't have the room for that kind of thing.
And you've been here 18 years already, is that correct?
That's right. The museum's been here for 18 years.
And one of your problems is really, very honestly, you could use more space, couldn't you?
Oh, definitely. We're definitely looking for space.
All right, at the museum, you guys are, how do you keep afloat financially? You keep afloat financially, but it's not easy for you, is it?
Well, we apply for grants, we have fundraisers, and we have a annual appeal at the end of the year.
Okay. And you also have a board that meets. How often does your board meet?
Our board of directors meets quarterly, and we have an annual meeting which all members are invited to attend, and that's where they elect the board members for the following year.
Okay, so if somebody's looking in right now, Jim, and there's something they really would love to donate to the museum here, did they call you? Did they just stop down with it? What would you suggest?
Just give us a call. 372-1880.
Okay.
And we'll find out what you have, and I can tell you pretty much right away whether it would be acceptable or not.
We're talking with Jim Weinzettel, the Executive Director for the Tomah Museum. Jim, let's take a little tour here.
Sure.
You know what jumps out more than I do, so the floor is yours.
Okay, we'll start here with our Native American items. We have baskets and memorabilia from 3 different tribes that were
Okay.
at one time in this area. We have the Ho-Chunk, which were formerly called the Winnebagos. The Ojibwe, who are now called the Chippewa, who are in northern Wisconsin. This was their southern hunting grounds. And the Menominee, which
Okay.
are in the Green Bay area.
Okay.
Chief Tomah, who the town was named after, was a Menominee Indian. And he came over here and held councils to keep the peace amongst the tribes of the area and the white settlers. And when Robert A. Gillette and Robert E. Gillette came to town in 1854, 1855 area, and decided that they knew that the trains would be coming through between Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Milwaukee and Chicago, and so they wanted to buy up some land. And the best way to get the railroad to come through your land was to build a town.
Okay.
So they laid out a town, and the next thing was to name the town. And the local legend told of this Chief Tomah, who had been in the area and was well known and respected by both white and red people in the area. So that is how Tomah got its name.
Okay. Where do we go from here?
Well, behind us we have the items that are from the VA hospital. It started out in 1892 at the facility as a Indian training school over on the far left. And in 1892 they had the government had children, Indian children from different tribes in these schools to teach them English and to have them learn a trade so they would not be dependent on the government for the rest of their lives. So it was a assimilation into the white culture. And this school ran from 1892 until 1936. During the Depression it closed. The hospital that's still standing out there on the right side of the road was the original Indian hospital. That continued until 1939 as
Okay.
the Indian hospital. Then during the war years, 1941, the Army Air Force took over and that facility, and they had many troops out there, and they taught something new called radar. And then in 1947, the VA was looking to build hospitals around the country, and the city of Tomah induced the government to make use of that facility out there that was now closed by the radio school. And they also added some property to it as a donation, and the VA decided to go in and build that 1,100 bed neuropsychiatric facility. There are 8 big brick buildings out there, and those were all part of the VA. Those all have 3-digit numbers like 400, 401, 402. The buildings out there that have the 2 digits like building 23, 32, those are all from the Indian school.
Okay.
Okay, moving right along. Here, I'm going to move a little quicker here.
Sure.
These are items that are dealing with hair. I think there's a hairnet and made out of human hair, 1910.
All right.
Cameras, stereoscopes, that kind of thing.
Star Wars stuff in here.
Star Wars stuff is donated on loan items, I should say. This is one of the few things that we have on loan that this is a collector that we have a space available for collectors of different things. So if you've got unusual collection that you'd like to display, you can bring it down here.
Okay.
Star Wars is a big thing right now, that's why we have that display. Now we have children's toys, dolls, games, high chairs. Up here on top you'll see strollers,
Oh, wow, yeah.
wagons,
Yeah.
things like that.
Stuff you don't see anymore, do you?
Right.
No.
This case here came from the city of Tomah. It deals with fire department and police department items. Thing I always point out is the lie detector from the police department.
Wow, interesting.
And our mannequins this year, each year we change what we put on our mannequins. This year we've put furs on them. This was part of Joyce's collection she had left when she closed the store. We have mink and fox and rabbit, and so come down and take a look at our mannequins. On the top shelf here is something interesting. It's ladies' hats that are made out of bird feathers. And many years ago, birds started becoming extinct because of the colored feathers that they were using for hats. So a law was passed that they could no longer buy and sell women's hats with live bird feathers. So these are just some of the remnants that are left over from that era prior to that. Here we have items dealing with homemaking. We have sewing, knitting, quilting, tatting, crochet, that kind of thing. So if you're into that kind of thing, we've got quite a collection of things. This building over here is the Lee House. Many of you are familiar with it because it was one time the Nieneman Funeral Home.
Yes, yeah.
It was built in 1870 and was used as an Indian trading post. It was also one of the hospitals in Tomah at one time. And then, of course, the Nieneman Funeral Home, and then it was lastly used by the Tomah Chamber of Commerce. About 8 years ago, the city council decided that they needed to build a police station, and the space they wanted was this building since it was falling down, and the city no longer wanted to keep it up. And despite the controversy, it was torn down and a police station was built in the space.
Yeah, a lot of people remember this building. It's a lot of things. I remember as the chamber, Nieneman Funeral Home, and I could say a lot of things, so.
This is a treadle sewing machine that goes along with our sewing and knitting things.
Wow.
And behind you, we have the school stuff. Starting with the one-room schoolhouses, going on to the junior high and the high school. Some of the tournaments, state tournaments that our Tomah High School has gone to over the years, back in the 30s, 40s,
Okay.
and on. And then, of course, the band, they actually made records and sold them. Some of the choir, Tomah High School Choir, under the direction of Bill Moline.
Okay, so all high school stuff in here.
Right. And then our main emphasis of our museum is Frank King. This is his, Frank King, of course, is creator of Gasoline Alley, graduated from Tomah High School in 1901. After he graduated, being a quite good artist, he went to become an illustrator in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and some of his original works from that period are over here. We also have a lot of his early artwork here. After he was working up there, they said, you know, you're such a good artist, you really should go to art school. So he attended the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, and one of his drawings was actually used on their catalog cover, the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. After he graduated from there, he was hired by the Chicago Tribune, and he was doing a lot of sketches for court cases and fires and sporting events in the Chicago area. One of his friends was a cartoonist, and he suggested that maybe he should try it. So he did. He developed a one-block cartoon, which was later expanded to Gasoline Alley, which was based on real characters from his hometown here in Tomah. The main character was Skeezix, who was a baby that was left on the doorstep of a confirmed bachelor. Walt Wallet, and the town raised him in the cartoon. The unique thing about the cartoon is that everyone gets older in the cartoon. The cartoon is still in existence today. It's on its third writer on the East Coast, and Skizix is now 120 years old and is a great-grandfather.
So now is this his actual desk here?
This is his desk that
This
he
is
used at the
actual
Chicago
desk.
Tribune,
Okay, wow.
and his typewriter, his easel, and his palette.
Okay, so the easel palette are all over here, okay. Okay. Yeah, he probably wouldn't use a typewriter nowadays, would he?
No.
No.
And these are things associated with Gasoline Alley. He retired in Florida and became a millionaire through his commissions on the various books, toys, dolls. He even had things in Cracker Jack boxes. He is buried out here at Oak Grove Cemetery along with his wife, Della Drew, who was of the First Bank of Tomah.
Oh, sure,
family.
okay, sure. Okay.
But we have a lot of his early drawings and pictures here that he drew prior to Gasoline Alley. So come in and peruse what we have, and it's
So
you'll be
Frank,
really
so Frank
interested.
King is like your focal point, huh?
It is
Okay,
the main part of this museum.
okay, I gotcha.
So here we have things from businesses. Some have come and gone through the years. Everything from the Goodyear Lumber Company to, let's see, who else we have here? Crossett Manufacturing on the south side of town. First Bank of Tomah, of course, now has got a different name.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all kinds of
Up on top there, yeah, absolutely.
cups, and if you keep coming, we even have hats and ashtrays and anything that has a Tomah name on it, especially if it doesn't, no longer in business. The dairies, the Maple Grove Dairy and the Rainey's Dairy.
Okay,
And then there's quite a tribute here to Bob and Shirley Langwell. Shirley was on our board of directors, and the family left some money here to the museum and paid tribute to them.
okay,
And of course, Frank Andrews and their Andrews Hardware were beneficiaries of that grant several times, and we certainly do appreciate that. Tomah Cash Store, of course, is one of the big businesses here in town. There's Neitzel's, and then there's the Cash Store.
okay,
These are some of the things from Joyce's Clothes Post. She not only sold dresses, but she sold jewelry and other accessories, hats, purses, things like that.
okay,
These are items dealing with veterans. Some of the items that they brought back as souvenirs, everything from a North Vietnamese officer's hat to a World War I helmet, and even World War II helmets. And then these are some pictures from there, and some of the medals that were earned by some of the soldiers from this town. Some Purple Hearts. Also things from the VFW, the American Legion. This little closet has items from World War I. Next year we'll be celebrating the anniversary of World War I in 2017, and we plan to do some discussion groups as we did with World War II.
okay,
Over here we have some items from the different organizations in town, the Rotary Club, the Women's Railroad Club, and several others that are now extinct.
okay,
This may be of interest to a lot of people. This is the Sherman House, which was located behind the cash store, It was one of the main focuses of Tomah for many years. It was actually on Main Street where the cash store was, and they moved it in 1906 in order to build the cash store, and they moved it behind it. It was a large 3-story structure. It was the main bus terminal, the Greyhound bus terminal in Tomah for many years. They had a restaurant there which was quite famous and was even written up in New York magazines. They tore that down and built the telephone company,
Okay.
which is now, of course, the college.
Right. Okay.
Over in this area, we have things dealing with agriculture and cranberry. At the top, you'll see a bunch of corn planters,
Mm-hmm.
a collection. And then in the middle, we have some railroad items. There's a conductor's uniform on top, and a model of a railroad that was built, pretty much whittled all in wood by Al Tickler, who worked at the railroad shops in the 1940s and 50s. With the exception of this metal part on the front of the engine, the rest of it, including the tracks, was all made out of wood.
Wow.
He whittled that out. The next area is sports. Of course, they've changed the name of the school mascot to Timberwolves, and now anything that says Tomah Indians on it, we are definitely collecting that.
Sure.
Those kind of
Sure.
items. So we have, everything from band uniforms and letters and seat cushions and you name it, that kind of thing. Then there's other items here dealing with sports. A baseball uniform from Oakdale from quite a few years ago, and ice skating, roller skates. Horse racing was a big thing in this town.
Yep.
Most
Yep.
of the
Absolutely. Yep.
most of the a lot of the families in town had their own trotter, and the Souls and Howies and the Roses and let's see, what was this one? Kenny's. All had their own horse and sulky. Okay, then we'll move over here into this one of our newer areas. This was our old office area years ago, and a few years ago we remodeled it into a kitchen. The green of the kitchen is pretty much the same as most households use that green color, and the stove there is a kerosene cook stove from the 1930s. It was salvaged out of the basement of Joyce and Frosty's house. It was quite rusty and it had to be redone, sandblasted. The refrigerator's from the 1950s. The freezer compartment holds one ice cube tray. Of course, most things in those days were canned, including meat. But if you were lucky enough, you could have a locker at the locker plant. But we have all kinds of things for dealing with kitchen items. Also in this area we have items from our high school, the annuals, the Tomah Hammock. We have them going back to 1912, and we have a complete collection up to, I believe, 2007.
Okay.
And of course we're looking for later years. We also have some duplicates available which we will sell. So if you're looking for one, didn't get one, when you graduated and you'd like one, check with us, we might have it for you.
Alrighty.
These are books that are from Tomah authors, so if you've written a book and you haven't donated it to us yet, bring it down. These are telephone books and city directories. They go back to 1915, and also in here we have a lot of things dealing with genealogy, family histories, articles on various things, famous people of Tomah, that kind of thing. Several centennials from not only Tomah but also the surrounding area. We have Camp Douglas, Oakdale, Wyville, Tunnel City. We have some materials on that also. A barber chair. This was used by Joyce's father and uncle, who had a barber shop in the front part of this building prior to it becoming a Joyce's clothes post. Her mother and her ran a restaurant on one side of the building in the front part, and the barber shop was on the other side.
Okay.
So this is quite old. It's probably around 100 years old.
Yeah.
This is a roll-top desk that once belonged to William Henry Maids, who died in 1918 and was the grandfather of Frosty.
Okay.
So that tells you how old this thing is. It's very, very old. Then we have things, technology. Got televisions up there, black and whites, without remotes and that kind of thing. Radios,
Yeah.
all kinds of radios.
Yeah.
Old telephone over here in the corner.
Wow.
And we've got a shortwave radio and record players.
Yeah, stuff we grew up with, right?
That's right,
Yeah.
some of us.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Northwest Telephone Company,
Yeah.
which was here in Tomah for many years. We've got some of their original
Wow.
telephones.
Wow.
Everyone always, the most photographed item in the museum is probably this green phone.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Then we have military items. We've got all the different services represented, including the women, and pay tribute to the 4 veterans that died in the Vietnam War from Tomah, and we have some of their uniforms, such as Mr. QB over here, and then we have a Medal of Honor winner who lives in the area, Mr. Stump.
Yeah, and that's his actual uniform, huh?
It is.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
And then we have a Marine uniform on top, which was recently given to us from a man who was at Iwo Jima,
Okay.
World War II. This is a cadet nurse's uniform, which was semi-military. It was run by the government agency, but they actually took young women and taught them to be nurses for the war effort. We have trunks that were used by immigrants, 2 different kinds, the flat top and the round top. This is kind of unique. This is you won't see this every day. This is the Wisconsin State Guard. Those men that wanted to serve their country during World War II were rejected by the government because of everything from flat feet to being too old, and they wanted to serve their country. They could serve in the Wisconsin State Guard. And you notice the badger on the uniform
Sure.
patch. The Guard operated within the state of Wisconsin, and they guarded lighthouses and airports and things like that. The uniforms were basically excess from World War I and from World War II, whatever they could gather. So it's kind of a mixture.
Sure.
Like here you'd see a World War I helmet with a World War II, or in between World War I and II uniform. Here we have clothing. We have everything from a flapper's outfit from the 1920s to dresses and top hats and items up here on top, both men and women. High button shoes, swallow-tailed hats, high top hats.
Sure.
These are all from late 1800s, early 20th century.
Okay.
This is another item that goes with the hairs. This is a hair wreath that was made between 1850 and 1875. It was made out of human hair, and it was quite popular in those days to have hair wreaths, either to hang them on the
Yep.
wall or to put them around their wrist as a remembrance of the departed. And if you wanted to make money at home, you could make socks and sell them.
Oh, sure,
This is a
sure.
early homemaking gimmick that they had.
Interesting.
And this is some of the school stuff and more of the Andrews stuff. And here is some of Frank King's items. These are the items that he did while he was up at Minneapolis, St. Paul as an illustrator. You notice they're all dated 1904, so they're all over 100 years old. But this is his illustration. He'd tell the printers what colors he wanted and how he wanted it, and then this would be the final product.
Sure.
Over here we have some of his drawings. Here he's making fun of the Cubs, who were still losing back in those days. And here's the Giants, and of course it was the New York Giants at that time. But it's kind of interesting to go through. There's some political cartoons, but everybody recognize who that is.
Absolutely. Okay.
Here we have an Indian headdress. This was used by the high school baton twirlers back in the 60s and 70s. And here's actually a picture of Denise Barta from 1974 and 78 with one of those headdresses on. And we've got a short little history about it here. You can come in and read.
Okay.
And we also have the key to the city. So.
I see that, yeah. Yes, the key to the city, yes, yes.
And Cardinal Glass, as a remembrance from the 1988, then they built Cardinal IG.
Okay.
And things like that. You know, we've got, let me tell you about some of the stuff over here too. We've got Traumers, quite a history on that, some of the early employees. We also have a history of Taft and Conway, which later became Larkins, which has now been resold again.
Oh, sure, down here, yeah.
These cabins are still in existence behind the current cabins over there. And then we have the hospitals, and right now we're trying to collect pictures of early gas stations. So anybody out there that might have some pictures of gas stations on Gasoline Alley, we certainly would appreciate a
Okay.
copy of that. There's going to be an art fair coming up in August, and we're going to try and be a part of that. We would like to sell some of our copies of Frank King's artwork, and these are the two that are probably the most valuable that we have, and we'll have full-size copies of those available for sale.
Okay.
Here again, we have more railroad. The railroading was big in this town. The railroad shops called frog shops, and also the bridge shops ran late 1800s up until the 1960s. At one time employed up to 400 employees. This is a picture from 1931, and as you can see, there's quite a few, and we have them all named of the employees. Quite a number of familiar names there from Tomah.
Wow.
People. This was a typewriter that was used in the freight office, and it types only capital letters.
Okay.
So when they sent out teletypes, everything would be in caps. One of our furs here, this is a fox. You can see the clasp of the teeth onto the...
Okay.
And we have a lack of wall space here, of course, so in our bathroom, we have life-size Skeezicks, Uncle Walt and Nina.
Okay.
And these were done by Frank King in 1965 when he came back here for a celebration at the First Bank of Tomah, one of their anniversaries.
So no wasted space down here, right?
That's right. We use every space we can.
Wow.
This is the GAR, Tomah GAR. That GAR stands for Grand Army of the Republic. It was like the VFW with the American Legion of the Civil War. Here's another fur. It's a mink. And from the Civil War, we have a Civil War amputation kit. And then we also have other items associated with medical. It came in here. And down below there are barber items, and you wonder, why are we mixing barber items with medical items? Well, back in the old days, before every little town didn't have a physician, so whenever somebody broke a bone or needed to be sewed up, they'd run them into town to the barber.
Mm-hmm.
He would set the leg or whatever, and sew them up. There's a major cut. We have on top here some baskets that were weaved by local Winnebago or Ho-Chunk Indians that sold them on Main Street here and up and down the road, because the main thoroughfare from Chicago to Milwaukee was right through the middle of town here. There was no interstate.
Right.
So it was quite popular to see that. These are our mayors, starting with the first mayor, Thomas McCall, all the way to our current mayor, Nellie Pater.
Yeah, see, Nellie's actually here. Yeah, Nellie's here, yeah. Okay.
Here we have items dealing with music. Everything from old musical instruments to bands that were in existence at one time or another, to singing groups. Here we have more toys. These are tin buildings. These are from like the 1950s. There's a farm, a dollhouse, and down below is a gas station. And then in between we have various cars and trucks that were made out of tin, metal toys, either steel or tin. Giveaways. Most businesses used to give away items for Christmas or for just for whatever anniversaries or maybe just to give it away to advertise. For everything from matchbooks to calendars to you name it, combs, pens. This display is just part of our collection that we received from Mr. Bjorgi, who was a superintendent of schools here in Tomah. He was a collector of memorabilia from the presidents, and he had autographs going back to early presidents in the 1920s. But he wrote to them and they wrote back, and he got an autograph and maybe a picture. But anyway, he also was kind of friends with the Kennedys. And in 1960, when John Kennedy was running for president, he came to Tomah and invited him to the school. This picture of him with the principal, Mary McAdams.
Sure. And
he was also out to the VA. That's a picture in the canteen out at the VA. But while he was at the school, the senior class got a promise from him, if he was elected president, that they would see him on their class trip on the White House lawn the following year. And of course he did become president, and the class trip fulfilled his promise, and here's pictures of them, the Tomah senior class on the White House lawn with the president. They presented him with a basket, Indian basket, and cheese and other things from Wisconsin. And a pleasure.
Jim Weinzettel, the Executive Director for the Tomah Museum. Jim, I've got to ask you, is there anything in the 18 years this place has been open you don't have, you wish you had?
That's a tough question. I'm sure there's things that we don't have which we'd like to have, but I can't think of anything right now that we're specifically looking for.
Okay, in the couple minutes that we have left here, last night as we sit down, the ball got rolling to form a preservation committee in the city of Tomah, historical preservation committee. The ball is in the process of just starting to roll, but the ball is rolling, and I know you're very happy with that, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. It's something that I spoke on behalf of our board of directors and endorsing the establishing this program here in Tomah, because I think it's really needed. We'll be able to at least get a handle on historic preservation. We've seen too many buildings go down that I know that some of them there was no way to save them, but in other cases that perhaps they could have been.
Jim, what are your hours down here?
We're open on Tuesday through Saturday from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
Okay. And you have a phone number, right?
372-1880.
Jim Weinzettel, Executive Director for the Tomah Museum. Nice enough to take us on a little tour. Jim, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to take us on a tour. And have a great summer, what's left of it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming down.
All right, so I want to thank Jim Weinzettel, the Executive Director for the Tomah Area Historical Society Museum, for taking us on a little tour on the community update for this middle of July. We hope you enjoyed it.